Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our 7th annual Wild Wisconsin Winter Web Conference. I'm Jamie Machik with the Wisconsin Valley Library Service, and I'm moderating today's opening session, as well as the library leadership track later today. And assisting me right now is Jean Anderson with the South Central Library System, and we are glad you're here. Our presenter for this session is Lauren Camino. And Lauren is the Neighborhood Library Supervisor for the Brooklyn Public Library. And she's going to be opening up our conference today. And we're really excited to have her here with us. So Lauren, whenever you're ready, please begin.
Okay, so hi, I'm Lauren Camino. As Jamie just said, I'm the Neighborhood Library Supervisor in one of the branches of the Brooklyn Public Library, the Mill Basin branch. And I'm co-founder and board chair of a small nonprofit library association called Urban Librarians Unite. I usually explain what ULU is. ULU is a small library association that focuses on library issues in urban areas. We do grassroots budget advocacy, a yearly conference, and service projects that make use of the special skills that librarians have. I am an accidental community organizer. I didn't realize that this was actually a thing that I was doing until several years after I had started doing it. Somebody had to tell me that's what I was doing because it didn't feel like I was organizing community, because I was mostly organizing librarians and library staff. But we are a community, and the skills that you build and the steps that you can take are the same, whether you're motivating librarians to do service projects and advocate for their library budgets, or helping motivate your community to solve some of the food security problems in your community as well. So today we are going to talk about some of the super basics of community organizing in libraries. Community organizing is a huge topic with people write books about it, and there are toolkits out there that are very complex, and we're going to go through some basics. So community organizing is essentially group problem solving. What's particularly fun about community organizing in libraries is that it's one of the reasons we even exist in the first place. Most of our institutions exist because a group of people in the community got together and organized a solution to sharing resources to increase literacy in their community, and libraries were the result of that. So when we look at community organizing as both the result of it, we are also perfectly poised to do it in our communities, because we are built from the community working together to do something. It is just the next step for us to do it outside of our building or inside our building with community members. So if we're doing our jobs right, just being a library at all is community organizing. So as librarians, we know that we get more done when we pool resources and work together. We're really good at that. That's why cooperative catalogs exist. So when we start to do things in our community, it's the same thing. We're very good at this. So with so many needs in our community, we can and should work with our neighbors to address them. And the idea that I've sort of come up with, and the way that I've always looked at this, is that no one's coming to save you, right? If your budget is being cut, there's no outside agency that is going to come and help you with it. If there is a systemic food justice problem in your community, no one from outside is going to come and rescue you. You have to be the paper bag princess of your community. And that's because real change comes from within neighborhoods and within towns and within communities, whatever community that is. So say we're using this hypothetical of the tenants association. So they form a tenants association and they come to the library because they need help. They need to get heat and hot water. It was 8 degrees this week in Brooklyn, and there are a lot of people that don't have heat and hot water, and a lot of tenants associations that are calling the city and working together to try to fix that. But how can the library support that? Well, like I said, if we're doing our jobs right, we are constantly community organizing. We have resources that people can use, and the library really should, we think of ourselves as a place where people can come and get help. So we have the opportunity to help them do that. And so why should we? I mean, we have all of the things that you need to address problems in our community. We have shared resources, we provide reliable information, and we provide a center for community. In the case of the tenants, we have computers and meeting rooms. We have a place where they can meet and talk and be part of a community. We have access to all of the information about tenants' rights that they can then use to get what they need to not be freezing, right? And so we, just by existing, again, provide these and provide a space for the community to address its issues. But in a situation that affects a whole community, like a disaster or food insecurity or a mass layoff, it's really important for the community to have this place to recover. And libraries are perfectly poised to be in this space. We have space, we're organized, we're embedded in the community, we're a known entity, a trusted source of information. And even in the absence of like a full-on disaster, most of our community problems can be partially addressed by shared resources, having a civic community and reliable information, those things that we have. As librarians and library workers, we're in a position that's unique in our communities and in our civic life. We have space and mission that includes sharing resources to make our neighbors' lives better for everyone. And we have this opportunity to do this work. And so we're going to talk a little bit about how we apply it. And like I said, be a library. After Hurricane Sandy, I was working at Queens Library at the time, and a lot of us volunteered to staff the book bus and a branch library that had been destroyed in the hurricane. We didn't have power, so we're working without power. We didn't have any books left because they'd been flooded out of the building when the building filled up with seawater and busted out the front window. All we had was our book bus and paper and eventually a whiteboard. There was a conversation in this about what the library should do to help the community respond to a disaster like this. There were some people who were saying that we should use our shipping trucks to help bring water and stuff like that, but it was decided that we just go be a library. And this was really helpful for people. It was one of those situations where no one knew how to find out anything. FEMA hadn't set up. There wasn't like a list of places where people could go to get food. We acted as an information center. We walked around to find the food distribution points that random volunteers in the community had set up and to find medical help. We told the people from FEMA what languages were spoken in the community and what translators they needed to get. The mail-a-book coordinator called all of the people that she mailed books to, and then if they didn't answer the phone, she went to their house. And at the same time, the community sort of coalesced around the library. We became the place where people came to set up their food. Somebody came and set up a giant barbecue and fed people outside the library. There was a Sikh temple came and fed people lunch for like an entire day. But we didn't feed people. We helped them find the food, and we didn't heal them. We helped them find care. We helped them access the information they needed to get their prescriptions. This was just part of doing our regular jobs, but doing it outside of a functioning building. And that's a thing that we can do, even if there's not a major disaster. It's a thing that we can do and cooperate with other groups to bring resources in to help solve problems. So before you can solve a problem, you have to know what the problem is. Framing a problem helps you figure out what it is that you're trying to solve and target resources and time more effectively. So when you're framing a problem, and this is a lot like project management, it's just in community organizing instead, you're going to start by asking what is actually the problem? Who's involved? What's contributed to creating this problem? What things do we have that we can use to help fix it? Because if you're framing it, if you have such a huge problem, it can be really difficult to figure out what a group of volunteers in the community can do to fix it. Societal problems can be so huge that they can be absolutely overwhelming. And the job of a community organizer is to talk to the community, figure out what it is that they need, and then help them come up with something concrete that can be done to help and assist in making it happen. By framing a problem, it's a little bit like when you are taking a photograph. You look out your window at a beautiful landscape and it's huge. You can't take a photo of the whole thing. And if you do manage to take a large vista, you're missing some of the details. The photo gets grainy. Whereas if you hone in and focus on the smaller area that you want to take a picture of, you can get a much more detailed photo. It's less overwhelming. It's perhaps a better composed photo, and you can really see what's in it. And that's incredibly important when you're talking about problems. So if you're talking about having funding for libraries, you need to know how much. If you're talking about helping with food insecurity, you would need to know how far can we go, what particular problem in food insecurity does the community want to address, and does the community have the resources to address. So when you're talking to the community, what the libraries can offer is what we've spoken about before. We have trust. Pew studies say we're one of the most trusted professions. I know people ask me questions that I sometimes wish they would have kept to themselves at the reference desk. They're very personal. They trust us enough to come and ask us those questions. We have staff, we have space, we have meeting rooms, desks, computers, places where people can meet. You can have your knitting group meet, but you can also allow the local tenants association to meet in your space and provide them with the resources they need. This is the stuff that's really part of our mission to start with. And that becomes part of the resources that the entire community has to solve its issues. So as an example, the Fresh Food Collective, working with the Southern Adirondack Library System in upstate New York, has created a distribution point for fresh produce. The Fresh Food Collective gleans the fields of local farms. You can see some of the carrots are pretty ugly. They bring that food, and then they bring that food into food pantries and food banks and soup kitchens. But there are 3 libraries in New York State where that act as distribution points. So the Pember Library and Museum, the Schuylerville Public Library, and Whitehall Free Library all have distribution points, a little fridge where the produce goes in, and anybody who walked into the library at any time can just come in and get some produce. So how did Sal's and the Fresh Food Collective frame this problem? So food insecurity is a humongous problem. And upstate New York has a lot of economic issues with sometimes plants closing down, places where there were jobs and now there aren't so many, different things happening that make the economy not as helpful to average people as it could be. But food insecurity is a humongous problem. You can't solve food insecurity as a small group of volunteers. It's a systemic issue. Fresh produce access is still a systemic issue, but within the smaller community, you can address it. It's not totally solvable, but you can create a space where the problem can be solved by providing a distribution point, building partnerships with community organizations. So when you frame the problem, when you zoom in on the one area you want to take a photo of, you can do small things that people can work together on to make their community better. In this case, the library systems and local libraries partnered with outside organizations to use that outside organization's resources and the library space to distribute it. Food gets distributed for more hours a day than it would be distributed at a food pantry. Food pantries are generally open for a couple hours a week. The libraries are always open. People who are coming in to look for jobs can also take some food with them. It molds the things in the community issues together so that more people can get help. And then, as you can see in the photo, they also show you how to cook the vegetables. So if you have like a kohlrabi, you might know what to do with it. My first kohlrabi was very intimidating. Okay. So this is where we get a little bit more into project management. So once you've framed a problem, creating a structure to address it, like a group where there are tasks that can be done, will help people who might look at a problem and go, I can't deal with this, have something to do. And that's really important. And with careful planning, a small group of people can make an outsized difference. You can see this really well in advocacy, where small groups can influence budget and public policy using technology, media savvy, and organization. This part of community organization is really my jam. This is where I like to do a lot of my work, because setting up structures to get work done, it makes things happen. So once you have your problem, you have to make a plan to address it. Most people, if you ask them, would want to make their community a better place. Who doesn't want to make their neighborhood better? I can't think of anybody who would actually say that, but they're overwhelmed by the problems. Like I said, you take the big vista picture, it's an overwhelming, awe-inspiring thing. It's difficult to know where to start. And that's why we framed our problem. But now we're going to create a structure, like a group where you have tasks that can be done, or a database where you can keep information, or a series of meetings where you can talk to people in the community. A lack of structure around a problem can be paralyzing. You don't know which decision to make first. So it's the job of the community organizer, and perhaps people like librarians who are pretty good at organizing things, to set up step-by-step plans to move things forward. So providing a map of actions that participants can take helps break that decision paralysis and move everybody towards a goal. If you can't see the steps, a problem can feel absolutely overwhelming. So I like to think of this as sort of a recipe. You have what needs to happen, which you've framed your problem. You've narrowed down into it what you want to do, your resources, and then you want to think about the steps of how to do things. I like to think of this as breaking things down into small, digestible tasks. Like I said, if you're trying to get a group of people to work on a larger problem, breaking it down into small tasks can do a couple of things. One, it helps people wrap their heads around the work that they need to do. Two, it helps to not overwhelm one person. This is super important, because if you're trying to solve a problem, you need a lot of different people working on it, so that one person doesn't feel like the burden is entirely on them. And it helps everybody move forward, because knowing that one person can be sick and things will still go and move forward, or one person can move out of the area and things will still happen, means that everybody can work a little harder. And three, it helps you figure out what you need to do, make a schedule of things that need to happen and who's supposed to be doing them, so that you can follow up on things. My example for this is the Refugee Libraries Project. This is an Urban Librarians Unite project that grew out of the Muslim ban at JFK. We, as librarians in New York City, were looking at people being kept from coming in who hadn't been told that before, and realizing that while information is constantly changing really quickly, it's so important for vulnerable people to have accurate information. And looking at that and thinking, well, what should we do? We built a database of resources that refugees and immigrants can use, or more likely what would happen with this would be that reference librarians would use these resources to assist patrons who are coming in to ask questions. We were not expecting the amount of volunteers that we got. This is one of those things where I was like, okay, we'll just make a database, put it on a website. It'll be easy. We'll get like 10 people working on it. And then 150 people signed up to help with this project from almost every state and several other countries like Australia and Japan and Italy. And we had to figure out a structure to manage this number of people working on the same project all at once. I used Airtable, which is a completely different presentation because I love Airtable. But we had to create this structure or it would have been madness. So we created jobs for people and a workflow, and we wrote it all down and we put it in a Google Doc, and we created a Slack page for people in the different jobs to talk. All of the volunteers in the volunteer tab have their jobs attached to their name. When they've put the information in the database, they sign off on it, and then they check a box, and the next person picks it up and does the thing that they need to do with it. And then eventually the last person picks it up after everything else is done and puts it on the website. Managing this number of people was very difficult, and there are things I would totally do differently. One of those things, and one thing that I would really recommend doing in any sort of community organizing process, is to not have one person be in charge of the entire project. Because as for me, being in charge of going through and saying, okay, this one's been added in, the editors have taken care of it, now I need to tell the metadata people to pick it up, wasn't a thing that I could do for the 100+ resources that went into this database as fast as they did. In hindsight, I would assign a leader to each work group. The editors, the researchers, the metadata people, the web admins, I would assign a leader for each group and have them be responsible for the smaller digestible tasks, while I sort of made sure things worked overall. In community organizing, there are a lot of people who would rather that there weren't hierarchies, and I absolutely understand that, because community organizing is in a large way about helping a community build power to address an issue. But at the same time, someone has to be in charge of tasks so they don't happen. So we have over 100 resources on our website. It's amazing. I feel like we could have more if we had people assigned to each thing. So making sure that someone has a lead and a responsibility is very important for getting people moving, which is the next thing. So this is what we have been building up to. You have framed the problem and set up structures. And this gives you the tools that you need to get people moving on a particular issue. In many ways, community organizing is about connecting people's own needs to a collective good or ideal. Saul Alinsky actually talks about this a lot, and I think he could have said it in half the time, but his book is well worth reading. People want to make change, but they're not going to take that action until it affects them. So yes, we all believe that tenants should have heat and hot water, right? Clearly, it's cold. People need heat. But are we going to stand out in the street protesting a landlord if we don't know someone who's missing heat? If it's not our grandmother or our apartment? Not necessarily. And sometimes you can address this, and for the most part, you are going to address this by talking to people, like introducing them to people who do have this problem, connecting it to an issue in that person's own life. We get people to help with community issues by creating mental connections between that issue and the person's own life. So again, we've framed the issue, we've set up a plan, and now it's our job to clearly communicate the needs of the project to the people who are helping. This is the most important thing. If you do not clearly communicate the work that needs to be done, once you have spent time talking to people in your community, really address the issue with the people who are most affected, ask them what they need. If you don't then pass that information on in a clear way, things don't necessarily happen. It's like at work, if your boss tells you to do something but doesn't tell you how they want it done, and then you do it in a way that they didn't want you to do, it's not necessarily your deal. It wasn't clearly communicated to you. So you want to make sure that you are very clearly telling people what the problem, the goal, and the needs. And this is where you can spend some time like calling people to the ramparts, connecting the needs of the community to their personal needs, getting them to come in and be willing to meet with you, and then tell them what help you need. And without doing this part, if you just say, well, we want to fix produce insecurity, we want people to have fresh produce, that doesn't leave anybody with an idea of what actionable tasks they can do to help you do that. If you just say it's bad that these people don't have heat, or, well, this stinks, our budget's been cut. Yes, everybody's going to say yes to that. You really want to make sure that you're communicating the plan that you just made to the people who need to help you with fixing the problem. You want to assign people tasks and then communicate with them about those. So giving people something to do is a major part of communicating what the needs are. When people say, yes, I want to help, have a thing for them to do. You can also ask them what they are willing to do, how much time they have, all of that sort of thing to sort of make sure that they can finish what you've asked them to do. But it's really important to not just say that you need something done, but to ask a specific person to do it, give them the resources to do it, and schedule a time to do it. This is so important. People don't just know what needs to happen magically. You need to tell them. So if you have tasks that you need to do, you need to tell them how to do it. If you care how it happens, then you should tell them how. If you don't, then just give them a goal. And you should make sure that you're giving specific people specific tasks that meet their skill set. Not everyone is a leader, and that is fine. Some people just want to do work, but need to be told what to do or asked to help with a specific thing. And that's okay. If everybody's trying to say what needs to happen, nothing will get done. So your job as an organizer is to help make sure that the tasks get done by giving them to people. You can tell people what needs to happen and then make a decision about how it needs to happen based on that individual person. So ABFU, so always be following up. Once you've given someone something to do, if you do not follow up with them, they may not actually do it. This is the fun magic of working with volunteers. As I know, we all know, we have volunteers in our library. People want to help, but they're busy. And a lot of times the things that don't affect their own daily lives and that they aren't being paid for get pushed down the to-do list because they don't affect their daily lives and they're not being paid for them. This is a thing that makes sense. It happens to everybody. So if you want to make sure things keep moving on a project, you need to ask people questions like, how is this going? Where, how much time do you think you need to finish this? Do you think you'll finish it by the time we talked about? Do you have any resources that you need to get it done? How is this process working for you? Do you need help? And then be willing and ready to help them make the adjustments they need to get it done, and make sure that they have the resources that they need to get it done. To make sure you're not putting so much work on one person that they don't have the time to get it all done. Sometimes people don't have time. They're missing resources, or they don't fully understand the task that they're being asked to do. And that's why following up with people and checking in is so important, because somebody could be working on a task and not doing what needs to be done because they don't clearly understand the thing that needs to happen. So following up addresses those issues, and it needs to be a continual process. Community organizing is a lot of work. It is a lot of talking to people. It's a lot of managing personalities and time and resources and other organizations missions, and matching them up with yours, and making sure that everybody is still moving towards the same goal. It is, it is intensive, and it's great if you split that work up, but this part you just sort of have to consistently be doing. Okay, and then this is one of the most important things. I don't think that we do this enough ever, but especially with volunteers, saying thank you is really one of the only payments they get. Volunteers and staff are how community organizing happens. There is no way to do any of the work of helping our communities build the power they need to address their social and economic issues, their educational issues, without the work of volunteers. Refugee libraries would not have happened if not for the 150 people who signed up to do the work. It was an intensive couple of months building it, and we wouldn't have been able to do it without the people who signed up, or the web developers who decided they wanted to help, the open data people who helped us redesign it, or all of those people who did work to make it happen need to be thanked. I remember one year we were fighting for budgets in New York City, and I had put in so much work, and I think it was the third or fourth year that we were fighting the same budget cuts every year over and over again, and I was tired, and I'd put in so much work. And it sort of felt like everybody just sort of took that for granted. Of course the budgets are going to come back. Ulu's working on it. Of course the budgets are going to come back. There are other people who are dealing with this, and they're organizing rallies, and that was us, and it felt like no one noticed the work at all. And we got our money back, and we almost always did. But that year, it was just really hard to do, to think like, am I going to do this again next year? Do I have to do this again next year? And I realize, maybe nobody cares if I do this work, and what happens if I don't do it? Will it make any difference? And then I got a text from a librarian that said, who has 2 thumbs and still has her job? This girl. Thank you. And it's like, oh, okay. All right, people do actually care that they still have their jobs. People do care and notice the work I'm doing. It's, I don't get paid. My job wasn't in danger. It was other people's jobs that were in danger, and they were actually noticed. It made me feel seen. I really think volunteers and people at work in general who do good work need to be seen. It needs to not be that the work happened and it happened so well that no one noticed the individuals who did the work. Like I said, this is the only payment that someone gets, right? if you do this for people, if you thank them and make them feel seen, they'll come back. They'll keep doing the work because that's that human interaction, just like the following up. This is like the final boss level of following up. You need to remember to thank people for doing their work. And so, thank you. I've put together some slide decks and resources. That was a little shorter than I meant it to be. I think I talked a bit faster than I meant. But there's a website of slide decks and resources, which I'll put up after we're done here today, with some books and articles that we can read. And I'm not on Twitter, but I am on Instagram. And I can take questions if people have specific things they want to ask. I can go back and go over things to talk about anything you'd like to actually talk about.
Great. Thank you so much, Lauren. So again, if you have a question for Lauren, please type it in the question box, and we have plenty of time to take them. Let me just go back and look. I did have some comments that I wanted to read throughout the presentation that came in. We did ask, if people were doing, community organizing already and how that was working. And Kelly said, our library has several literacy council tutoring sessions where we provide the space for our community members to meet, whether they are the tutor of the student. I would categorize this as community organizing. What do you think about that, Lauren?
Yeah, like I said, being a library, that a lot of what we do in trying to build resources for our community through the library is community organizing. All of the literacy projects where people coordinate with like state education departments or outside literacy organizations to bring those services into the library, that's a form of community organizing. I think people get scared by the term community organizing. I think particularly in the 2008 election, it became this sort of hot button term that no one wants to say they're a community organizer because everybody's like, oh my God, Saul Alinsky. But really we do it all the time and just don't realize that we're doing it.
Absolutely. Another comment, and I did see a question about the slides and resources. We will be posting the slides and the recording on the conference website by the end of today, so that will be available to you. Barb mentions Kenosha Public Library is a leading organization in Kenosha's Strive initiative we call Building Our Future. So we work with about 60 organizations toward building capacity for student success. There are 3 layers: early literacy, third grade reading proficiency, and higher ed. It's a national movement adopted at local levels.
Yeah.
Is that something you're familiar with or have heard of, or any thoughts on that?
Yeah, in New York City, we have something called literacy zones, which sounds similar, although it's not specifically for K to 12 student success. It's generally for adult literacy, where the state created these literacy zones where libraries then coordinate with other adult learning agencies, the Human Resources Administration, to help people get the resources that they need to succeed in their adult literacy classes. Because if you don't have a place to live, learning to read is going to be a sort of lower priority. And so I think those projects work really well. Particularly, I think these projects tend to work really well in both ways. Sometimes they come from government and sometimes they come from the community itself. I think you can get more buy-in if it comes from the community itself, but anything where you're addressing sort of systemic poverty issues is going to improve education.
Awesome. Another question that came in is, do you have tips for reinvigorating a project that isn't going well, particularly a project where everyone says, yes, this is a good idea, but nobody is stepping up?
So that's where I think creating those digestible tasks is so important, and following up with individual people. I've sort of learned a lot of this the hard way of thinking about several projects right now. where volunteers and people who have offered said, yes, this is a great idea, are much more likely to help if you call them up and say, this is a thing that needs to get done. Can you do this for me? Another thing that we do at ULU is we do just work parties. We get pizza and beer and get as many people in a room as we can to do the tedious work. Making it a social event helps people know when it starts and ends. It makes it more than just sitting at home entering lines in a database. But you have to ask them to do that. Earlier this month, I realized I was getting sort of overwhelmed by a project and emailed our board and said, can you all meet with me on Sunday? I cannot get all of this done by myself. We do that for another project we have called our elected officials database, where we sort of track information about local elected officials, like their phone numbers, their district addresses, their policy priorities, and then connect them back to libraries so that when we're talking to them, we can say, I see you have like senior citizens. Let me tell you about all the things we do to serve that population. But that is a lot of work. We have 51 city council members, and that database needs to get updated every couple of years. And that's the parties. They make it a little better, easier to do.
Awesome. We had another comment how someone said in her community, she's trying to or starting out by reaching out to local businesses one at a time, and they are a population of 1,300. So how does that work in a small town on a scale of where you're at in a community like Brooklyn, which is obviously a lot larger and with more resources and with more people?
I think it sort of depends on what you're asking to do. So we tend to end up working with other nonprofits rather than businesses. There are so many businesses in New York City that it can be, like, I wouldn't actually know where to start. And I don't know that we need anything specifically from businesses as an organization. At work, it would, in my neighborhood, with my library, I would reach out one at a time, but I always know what I need from them and have something to offer them back. So like if I need donuts for the knitting group, we might put on the flyer that they gave us donuts,
Right. Exactly.
Working with other nonprofits has been a little easier, particularly like I mentioned in passing, the open data community in New York City has been really helpful with the Refugee Libraries Project. They let us be part of their hack hall at their conference, and we got a lot of really great feedback and ways to fix our workflow that we hadn't thought about. It was immensely helpful.
Great. Again, if you have a question for Lauren, we can take that this time. One thing I'm curious about, Lauren, is what do you, and this isn't, I guess it is related to your topic, but one thing I'm curious of all of our presenters, conferences, what do you find exciting? I mean, because I think we can find a lot of negativity all the time. All the time. It's totally right. So what do you find exciting about working in libraries right now? What excites you?
I mean, yesterday I was trading horrible jokes with a 7-year-old. They were the worst jokes. Absolutely terrible. And that's, there's not a lot of places where a 7-year-old can walk up to an adult and spend like 8 minutes telling really bad jokes back and forth without that adult being like, I don't have time for you. And I'm not children's services, I'm a branch manager, I do adult services, but that's the fun bit. It's all about like the community being able to come in and hang out and interact with people.
Absolutely. Another question just popped in from Kelly. She wants to know, can Lauren talk a little bit about starting the produce program in a library?
I cannot. That is not my project. But I'm using it as an example of a really amazing project we saw pop up this summer. But if somebody wants to send me an email, I can hook them up with Sarah and Erica at the Southern Adirondack Library System. It seems like, for me, looking at it, it seems like they just talked about the issue, found a solution, and went and moved forward with it. I think there are smaller libraries, so like in my library, I would have to deal with so many issues around food and risk management and multiple layers of administration. I think sometimes those projects can be a little easier in a smaller place.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Well, I'm not seeing any other questions come in. So again, I want to thank you so much, Lauren, for a great opening session. As mentioned, this session recording and slides will be posted to our conference website by Friday, January 25th. We have two tracks coming up at 10:30 Central Standard Time. One is in youth services, and the other one is in library leadership. And again, they both begin at 10:30. We hope to see you at some of those. And if not, I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you for tuning in, and so long.
Thank you.